Yes, indeed. Former President Jacob Zuma is set to appear in the Durban High Court on the 6th of April. As you heard there, the elite crime fighting unit, the Hawks, have finally served a summons on the former president today. And it relates, of course, to 16 fraud and corruption charges, which were reinstated earlier this month, 9 years after the NPA dropped them all those years ago. And, of course, Aldrin Sampear is here to unpack it for us and just really give us a sense of what is meant to happen. So, there it is, a moment that many people thought would never actually happen, the 6th of April. Accused number one is going to be one Jacob Zuma.
And then, of course, accused number two will be a representative from the company Tint, the French arms company. And quite interesting, though, is that on the 6th of April will be exactly 9 years since then acting NPA boss Mkotori made the announcement and said that the charges against President, or then only ANC President Jacob Zuma, will be dropped. And now 9 years later, he will appear in the Durban High Court to face exactly the same charges, except for two.
How slow the wheels of justice turn, some might say. Of course, it's not a fait accompli because his lawyer, Michael Hulley, has said they're going to launch an application to review the decision by prosecution's boss, Shaun Abrams, to reinstate those charges.
Well, certainly, this has been an indication that immediately after that decision was given by the NPA that they will be reinstating the charges against the former president, the former president's lawyers did indicate that they would be looking at reviewing this decision that has been taken. And today we do have confirmation that indeed they are finalizing their papers. Not too sure when exactly the papers will be filed in a high court to review that decision. But quite interesting is the tactic that they're using here is that the tactic is rather to challenge the decision instead of challenge or try and push for a permanent stay. You'd remember that there is also the South African Natives Forum that has made a similar application, but their application is for permanent stay of prosecution against the former president.
Of course, there's speculation around who is behind such an organization like the South African Natives Forum. But whichever way you look at it, that stay for the permanent stay rather for the prosecution and this review application by Michael Hulley, are we looking at the typical Stalingrad tactics that the former president has so often used to try and delay his day in court?
This is certainly it. Remember that it was KMJ Kemp, President Jacob Zuma's senior counsel, who's been saying this, that we fight in every corner, we fight in every street, and that is the tactic that's being used at the moment. Remember that President Jacob Zuma, former President Jacob Zuma, had always said that he wants to have his day in court and he would like to clear his name, but he has been fighting this decision at every turn. How many times have this matter been in court? It stems from back 2000 and 2005, and remember that back in 2008 when a high court as well then said that actually the NPA is not ready to prosecute then only the president of the ANC, and that matter was struck off the roll. And that's the double whammy that the prosecution is dealing here with whether they will continue with the prosecution, considering that there's this permanent stay of application that has been filed by the South African Native Forum, and also this decision to review the decision taken by Advocate Shaun Abrams. How do they deal with this matter? But now we know that there's confirmation that President Jacob Zuma, the former President Jacob Zuma, on the 6th of April, with his co-accused, whoever the representative is from the company Tint, will be appearing before the Durban High Court.
One of the contentious issues, of course, in recent days is around the legal fees. We heard in Parliament President Ramaphosa first making mention of it. We now know the DA and the EFF have challenged this so-called deal for the state to still foot the bill for the former president's legal fees. That may also throw a spanner in the works.
And this is another issue. I don't know if that will impact the case as it stands at the moment, or the proceedings of the case as it stands. That's unless if we have a court ruling that comes out in the next few days before the former president appears before the court, and the former president's counsel will appear before the court and say that there is no funds coming forward from the former president, and for that reason KMJ Kemp, who we expect to represent the president, is the former president is standing down. So we'll have to wait and see exactly how that plays out. But I don't think that it will have an initial implication on the case.
Politically, of course, there are other considerations here. We already understood that the former president would be campaigning for the ANC, particularly in KZN. in the build-up to next year's elections.
It's already started.
And yet we heard yesterday from the Secretary General saying that the party itself wouldn't be supporting him in their official capacity. He says individuals can do this, but the party line is that we will not be showing up to support, unlike all those years ago when you heard, or when you rather saw, the top six coming into the court to support former President Jacob Zuma.
Certainly politics, it's quite interesting how the tides have turned, because remember that back in 2007, 2008, when that decision was taken to reinstate the charges against then former president, the president of the ANC, Jacob Zuma, the NEC set up a task team, and that task team was led by Lindiwe Sisulu. That task team looked at the charges that the president of the ANC was facing at the time, and whether it would be prudent to have him as the presidential candidate going into the elections. And now he's not the ANC president anymore. It almost seems as though that the ANC, the mother body, is chanting him and saying that, listen, unfortunately, we can't support you now going forward, especially considering that we're going into these elections. And if you take into consideration the remarks made by the former president of the ANC, Thabo Mbeki, in an interview that he had this past weekend, where he indicated this issue that the ANC needs to rid itself from this perception of corruption and also cut ties with people who are perceived to be corrupt. It will be quite interesting how President Jacob Zuma deals with this issue, because if you look at the voter registration weekend, he was campaigning vociferously in KZN. And one expects that on the 6th of April, when he appears in the Durban High Court, that there will be ANC supporters supporting him. But of course, there is this decision by the NEC that's saying, please do not show up in your ANC regalia. But whether they will adhere to that is something else.
That's a decision they're going to certainly have to make. But the legal woes facing the former president, not all quite over yet. We saw weekend reports suggesting that he'd been involved in allegations of bribery. R1 million is the figure that's being thrown out there. That's something that might further complicate his reputation and his image.
Yeah, this is another case. And yesterday, when I was speaking to the first Deputy Secretary General of the SACP, Solima Baila, said cases like these just re-emphasize their notion that the former president, President Jacob Zuma, should not be seen campaigning for the ANC, because now there are these allegations again that while he was president of the country, there was this R1 million bribe that was paid to him to keep Zokwana, who is also the chairperson of the SACP, on board. And that's the reason why the SACP is saying that get rid of this person. He must not be seen to be campaigning for the ANC. But then on the other side, the NEC has already taken a decision that says that the former presidents of the ANC, including the former deputy president of the ANC, Kgalema Motlanthe, must form part of a forum that would help the ANC as it deals with the challenges that it's currently dealing with.
The ghost of President Zuma still with the alliance, because of course there have been strong denials from the SACP and COSATU insofar as their principals are involved in these allegations. Aldrin St. Pierre, thank you for bringing us up to speed with what might happen.